What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show. As always, I like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. Also realize that I'm the host of Epic Conversations, and the Dr. Vibe show is the place for epic conversations. And always, we like to welcome new friends to the Dr. Vibe show to have epic conversations. And we have another new friend. This gentleman, I don't like to say stalking, but watching what he's been doing over the last few weeks online. He's been all over the place. And I said, okay, let me get him on the Dr. Vibe show. Not, not a post, but no one else was doing like a face-to-face conversation. So I said, let the brother from Canada get him face-to-face. So who do we have here tonight? We have Jason Rosario. He's the founder and creator of The Lives of Men, and it's an integrated media and lifestyle brand that chronicles the unique stories from the perspective of men of color. They inspire, activate, and nurture the development of well-rounded men while serving as a compass to help them navigate their life's journey. So we are blessed and highly favored to have Mr. Jason Rosario from New York. And I have to shout out, he has a great looking and a great heart production team behind him. So Jason, welcome to the conversation. How you doing?
Thank you, Dr. Vibe. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and I feel fantastic. Thanks again for having me on.
Oh, the pleasure is mine. I'm really excited and jacked to have some time and to spend with you to hear some of your journey, hear some of the Lives of Men journey. But let's start with yourself first. Can you share a little background about yourself with our audience?
Absolutely. So I am a born and bred New Yorker, raised in the Bronx, New York, and I'm the oldest of five children on my mother's side. I have two beautiful sisters on my dad's side, and I am of Afro-Latino descent. My parents are from the Dominican Republic, so I identify as an Afro-Latino. And growing up in New York has been a unique experience, as you can imagine. But it's been a fantastic journey, and I'm a proud dad to a 15-year-old, soon to be 16-year-old young lady. And that's me in a nutshell. I'd say I'm a father first. I am a son, brother, partner, and friend. All of it is secondary to my role as a father.
Excellent. Growing up in the Bronx, I've been to the Bronx a lot. Five of you. How was growing up with five siblings?
Interesting, because I was the oldest of five, and so our family dynamic was somewhat interesting because my sister that follows me, we had the same dad, and then the three younger siblings have a different dad, and so there's somewhat of an age gap there. But obviously it's all family. So I was almost like a father figure growing up to them when they were growing up, and obviously when I was kind of growing up at the same time. And so that was a unique experience. And my mom is a phenomenal woman, Dominican immigrant woman who came to this country and pretty much made herself. And so you can imagine that the challenges that she had to face were pretty significant. And so for us, it was just learning from her and watching her experience and really taking from that a lot of lessons, right? Hard work, sacrifice, family, and values. All of those things are things that I think all five of us really embody and really took from our mom. So, she's the matriarch, and she is for the strongest woman I've known and I've seen in my life. So definitely an experience, definitely not easy, but definitely would not have changed anything that we experienced growing up.
That leads to two more conversation pieces already. How much has Dominican heritage impacted your life?
Well, like I said, I identify as an Afro-Latino, and I think specifically within Dominican culture, that's somewhat unique because we have a lot of issues, a lot of documented issues around colorism and our embracement, for lack of a better word, of our African heritage. And so as an Afro-Latino and a Dominican, I'm very proud of that, because if you look at the foods that we eat, you look at the music that we listen to, the just everything that we embody as a culture. Look at my skin tone. I mean, everything is African. And so it'd be somewhat naive to not own that and really embrace that. So I would say that's probably the biggest point of pride for me as an Afro-Latino Dominican American individual.
And I now want to switch over to your mother. You speak very highly of her. And what sort of impact, what sort of lessons did she instill in you that you carried on today to be the man that you are today?
Wow, if I start to answer that, we're going to be here forever. So I don't know.
Well, I told you, like I told you beforehand, that I'm not a one and done guy. So take your time. Take your time.
Right, right. Well, I appreciate that. I think, so many lessons that I got from my mom, and it's just I can't point to one, but I can tell you that her work ethic, the level of sacrifice. I mean, she sacrificed not just for me as the oldest son, but for all of us, and she continues to sacrifice. So all of those things are just values that I can only hope to even meet halfway, because again, she came to this country with a lot less opportunity and with a lot less at her disposal in terms of resources. She didn't know the language. She didn't have an education. She had an education, but not kind of what we would think about today, right? College educated, grad school, and all those things. And so she had to make it, and she did. And what I was really proud of is that at a later age, she went back to school, finished her bachelor's degree, and is now working with the Board of Education. And so you think about that, and you think about that journey. I mean, that's just something that when I look at that, there's just nothing I can't tell myself that I can't do something because she was able to do it.
Man, sounds like you and her need to be on the show together next time. We may have to.
Oh, that would be a great idea, and I'm sure she's watching it, so I'm sure she's thinking that, and she's also probably crying her eyes out.
Oh well, hey, you know what? It's all in love, man. It's all in love, big time. Growing up in the Bronx, actually, let me cycle back for a moment. You didn't mention a father. Was there a father figure in your life growing up?
Yeah, no, and I think that's the gateway to probably the rest of the conversation that we'll have. My dad was around for a little bit, but they divorced when I was 3 years old.
Wow.
And so between that age and say 13, 14, he was kind of in and out, periods where he wasn't around for a long time. So I can't say that I grew up with a father figure in the home. I had a lot of father figures around me. I had my uncles, I had cousins and just friends and acquaintances, but not a father figure in the home.
And how much of an impact did that have on you growing up in the Bronx as a young African-American man, African Latino man? How did that impact your life?
Significantly, because as you know, a father in the home is very important in terms of providing structure, in terms of providing the basic framework for self-confidence and self-esteem. And so as a man of color growing up without a father, I'm obviously not the first, I won't be the last, unfortunately, but it affected me significantly. And I think the one thing that I got out of that, and I turned it into a positive, is that I learned how to be a dad and what kind of father I wanted to be by what he did and didn't do, right? And so unfortunately he's passed a few years ago, but before he did, I was grateful that we were able to make peace, and I forgave him for a lot of the mistakes that he made, because I realized that now as a father, he, as I mentioned with my mom, I mean, he came to this country with he knew the language, but not nearly to the level that, I know it today. He didn't have as a robust education as I do. And so he had limited choices and limited opportunities. So he made the best he could. He did the best he could with what he had. And so I forgave him for that. So I think the biggest lesson I learned was that I knew I didn't want to be the type of father that he was to me. And so I just adjusted my behavior accordingly.
And what was the experience like going to high school, college, etc.? Can you share some of that journey with us?
Sure. And I think, again, I mentioned the biggest thing that I'd say I missed from not having my father around was just not developing the sense of confidence and self-esteem that I saw other kids who maybe had their father or fathers around, where, they had this sense of feeling like they belonged. And I think I even struggled with that till today, right? It's self-esteem and self-confidence is something that I always have to remind myself and affirm that, I do belong and that I am worthy. And so realizing my self-worth has been a lifelong process. And I think a lot of that has to do with the lack of having my dad around. So again, you asked me about high school and college. High school can be a little bit unforgiving, right? Because kids are ruthless. And so growing up playing sports, the thing about dads is that that's the first man that you try to impress as a young man, right? And you go out and you throw a baseball around and you want your dad to say, "Hey, son, good job." And I didn't have that. And so that was very difficult. And so I realized that I started to look for that type of approval outside of myself, with the people in my life and later in years, partners, for example. So all of those things I realized really come from that root cause of not having a dad in my life early on. I can't hear you, Dr.
Sorry,
Bob.
sorry about that. What did you take in college? What sort of studies did you take in college?
Okay, I majored in economics and finance.
Okay.
So I did a dual major in economics and finance
All right.
in undergrad, and then grad I went to NYU and did an MBA recently.
Congratulations. Good stuff. So when you graduated out of the world of MBA, what sort of work either were you or are you doing right now?
Well, it's an interesting story. So since you and I have started speaking, I actually took the leap and left my job. And so,
Oh, okay.
yeah, so I am now in the world of entrepreneurship, and it's scary, but it's fun and it's empowering. But in terms of the MBA and why I decided to do it, I was in finance for 11 years, 10, 11 years, in a variety of capacities. I was very successful there. I was able to live in Geneva in Switzerland for a couple of years through my career. I was in investment banking and private wealth management, and decided to go back to business school to kind of align with a little bit more of my passion, which is real estate, or one of my passions, which is real estate. So I went to Stern, got an MBA, and for the last couple of years, I've been working at a company, major commercial real estate company in New York, and yeah, until recently decided to leave.
What was the reason for pivoting?
The lives of men, largely,
Okay.
but more importantly, I think it was, again, you get to a point in your life where you start to realize that life is short, and you start to value different things. You start to value time with your family. You start to value the little bit of time that you have on this earth to make a positive impact. And I just felt that I wasn't doing that behind a computer on a 9-to-5 basis. And so I definitely, I respect the virtues of having a job. I don't knock it by any means, but I just started to realize that I had more to offer the world than just my skills behind a spreadsheet and a computer. And concurrently, I had been working on this project called The Lives of Men. And the more I focused on it and the more conversations I had about it, the more confirmation I got from the outside world. And more people were asking me, so why aren't you doing this full time? And what's next for it? And what are your plans for it? And so, classic case of all the stars aligning, certain things were happening at work, certain things were happening outside of work, that it just kind of met in one place, and I had to make a decision. Literally one day I had to make a decision, and I made the decision to pursue my dreams, and here we are. So it's been about a month and a half.
Okay. Well, congratulations for knowing your dream and pursuing your dream.
Well, that's what I'm most proud of, right? I'm most proud of knowing what my calling is, right? A lot of people say, congratulations for leaving your job, and that's great, and I appreciate that. But what I'm most proud of is having gotten to the point in my life where I've heard my calling, because a lot of people live their entire lives without ever getting to this point, and so that's what I'm really proud of.
Yeah, I was in a coaching individual the other day, and I said to them, "What is your dream?" And they couldn't answer me.
Wow.
And I think there are many individuals out there that don't know what their dream is or have lost their dream, and that's not a good place to be. So kudos to you to know what your dream is and pursue it. I just want to shout out to the people who are watching this live. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your positive, productive schedules. If you have any questions or comments, please type them in. If you have any questions, please type them in, and I'll get Jason to answer them in real time. So let's get to the lives of men. How did that start? What's the story behind the lives of men?
The story behind the lives of men is simple. It's just me having been present to my life's journey. And I know that sounds somewhat esoteric, but it's very true. And what it is just really, it's a very personal journey. It's my life. Every piece of content that you see, every article is a piece of me in some way, shape, or form, either an experience, or something that I either went through directly or personally, or something that I've kind of witnessed or experienced by extension. So the Lives of Men is really a way for me to kind of impart some of my own experiences and some of the ups and downs and mistakes that I've made onto other brothers, right? Who can probably stand to benefit from those experiences and hopefully not make as many mistakes. But I think we live in a world where we don't have as many resources for men of color specifically. I think there's a dearth of positive imagery, positive reinforced messaging that I think is needed, especially in the social political landscape that we live in today, especially, you know, what's been happening with the police shootings late last year. So I think we need somewhat of an uplift. And I think there's a lack of a one place where men of color, right? And I think our content can reach mainstream in that it touches issues that all men can relate to, but specifically for men of color, there's no one place for us to go to seek that advice or to seek those types of resources. And that's what I'm trying to create.
Excellent. Where did you come up with this idea? Do you remember when you came up with this idea? Were you with someone, or was it sounds like it was a process of time, but when did you say, okay, it's time to make this happen?
Sure. A lot of things happen out of so great things are born out of great pain in many cases, right? And the Lives of Men is the second iteration of something that I had created a few years ago with a close friend of mine. And it was called The Gentleman's Journal at the time. And the idea behind that was going through some personal issues with a relationship and coming out of that and talking about some feelings that I felt and he and I felt were things that we can not only relate to with one another, but also put out to the world and maybe have other brothers gravitate to. So we put this out and it was super well received, but it was, we weren't there emotionally to really see it through. But I think the biggest thing is that we underestimated the amount of work that it took to really bring it to life the way we wanted it to. So we took it down, but it was always something that was in my heart and my mind. And I always knew that I was going to revisit it in some way. So you fast forward and here we are. The Lives of Men is somewhat that, but with a lot more scope to it. I think it's got so many legs to become a broader organization or broader resource than just an online blog. And so that's the thinking behind it.
What you just shared is somewhat similar to how my journey online started, because I believe a lot of great ideas have a birth, death, and resurrection. And it sounds like what you went through with what the Lives of Men is right now is a birth, death, and resurrection. So when you said you wanted to go ahead with that, who was the first person you told?
Wow. The first person that I spoke to when I started to vet whether or not this was important or if I wanted to do this was my sister Barbara. And Barb, because she was the closest person to me, and I reached out to her, I said, hey, what do you think? And unequivocally, she said yes. And I was like, okay, done deal. The conversation was maybe about 10 minutes.
Right.
And then I reached out to two other individuals, and one was my partner, and then the other person was someone who had been involved in the previous iteration of what I did. And they all confirmed what I was already feeling and what I was thinking, which was I need to do this, but they confirmed that I was on the right path. And that was it. And it was just a matter of executing at that point.
So from the time you got that confirmation from those individuals to it actually launching, what space of time was that, and how much work did it take to launch?
A significant amount of work. I'd say that I started to have those personal conversations in June of 2016. We had our first meeting. I remember it like it was yesterday, on July 31st. And it's where I gathered a whole bunch of just people that I trust, people that are well positioned, not just from a personal perspective, people that know me and I trust and love, but that are also uniquely positioned through their own network and their own occupation to help me bring this to life in a way that I think is really in the way I envision it. And so that first meeting took place July 31st. And we launched on January 21st of this year. So in the span of less than 6 months, we went from ideation phase to coming up with a name and strategy and voice to fully executing some content and then putting out a website. So it was pretty quick.
Do you remember that first day that you launched?
Yeah, it was scary. We launched, yeah, it was scary. I remember being at work and all day at work, I'm kind of just having text messages and conversations with my team back and forth. Are we ready? Do we have this video? Is it ready to go? Is the website ready? Are there any bugs? And nothing was perfect. I can tell you down to the last minute, it was T minus, I think, 5 minutes, and we were still having issues with the website. And I just closed my eyes and said, we just got to go. We got to do this. And we pressed publish, and oh my God, it was the video that we launched with, the one that you put up on your website, went out at 7:30 p.m. that evening. By the following morning at 9:30 a.m., it had over 4,000 views and about, I don't know, call it 350 shares. I mean, it was just unbelievable, the reception that it got. And I was just like, wow, this is confirmation that I'm on the right path.
So what was the secret or some of the secrets that made that launch so successful in regards to the online views? What was the secret sauce or some of the secret sauce that made that initial launch just go bang?
Dr. Vibe, I wish I could tell you that it was a secret sauce, but I think what people really gravitate to is just a sense of being genuine and vulnerability. And I think, again, if you go back to that video, I'm pouring it out in that video, and I'm really just kind of walking people through the inspiration behind the thinking behind this brand. There's no ego here. Well, I can't say there's no ego. There's got to be some ego in that. We're putting things out, but this is very personal to me. And I think when you see things nowadays, especially in the world that we live in now, it's hyper connected. Social media is everywhere, and I think people yearn for these genuine connections and genuine things that they can latch onto and gravitate to. And I think that's probably what led to most of it. I think aside from the production quality and all of that, I think that's what people really gravitated to.
So who was the first media outlet to want an interview with you? And what was your response?
Well, absolutely yes. So thegrio.com.
Right.
And I'm fortunate enough to have David Wilson, who is the founder of The Grio, is a personal friend of mine, is also someone who I've confided in throughout this process.
So that's part of the secret sauce.
Is it?
Well, you had your net was working.
Yeah, for sure. The net was working. That's a great phrase.
Yes.
Yeah, so I did an interview with them, and they were one of the first few people that published it. And then from there, I received a call from the Huffington Post Black Voices. I did a piece with them. A brand called Now This recently did a piece on us. So, slowly but surely we're getting the media attention, but I think it's got everything to do with the message that we're putting out, the quality of the content that we're putting out, and the consistency, I think.
What are some of the issues or subjects that you want to address for men of color?
When I think about what people would gravitate to the lives of men for in terms of the topics and conversations, I think about three things that are near and dear to my heart, right? Is the topic of fatherhood is one. We've spent some time talking about the importance of not having a father in the home early on, specifically for men of color. I'm a father now, so I think between those two experiences, I have a lot to say and a lot to offer there. The topic of personal development and looking at yourself in a very deep way and learning yourself, understanding yourself so that you understand where you're going. So those topics are very near and dear to me. And I think mental health is another topic that we don't talk about a lot. Sexuality, masculinity, all of those things I think are things that when you think about the lives of men, I want people to say, okay, I know that that's my resource for these types of topics.
Well, I'm going to ask you to share some of your thought process on some of those topics that you shared with us. So let's look at, obviously, one of the biggest ones, fatherhood in the African-American community. What do you feel the state is right now? And what do you feel maybe some of the misconceptions about fatherhood in the African American community, male community?
Yeah. I think I'll start with the misconceptions. And one of the misconceptions is that Black fathers are non-existent. And that's not true. I think that we just don't get enough shine, right? We don't get enough credit for being there. And I know plenty of black, brown dads that are in their kids' lives. And, you know, fatherhood is something that if you're doing it right, it's not something that is going to be celebrated. It's kind of your job. You're not going to get a trophy for showing up to your job, right? But I think it's important to recognize us. I think as men of color, we're much more than just athletes and rappers. We are fathers, we're partners, we're brothers, we're sons, and all of those things. So I think as it relates to fatherhood, that's one of the biggest misconceptions, that we're not around and we're not present. In terms of what I hope to achieve with our content and with our messaging for fathers is to bring fatherhood into a more approachable, a state where people can embrace it and understand that it's somewhat overwhelming and it's a big responsibility, but it can be a labor of love. And the reason I say that is, as an example, my relationship with my daughter, who you saw, who's on my production team.
Yes.
My relationship with her is very much a friend. She's my homie. She's my best friend. She knows everything about me. She knows when I'm happy, when I'm sad, when I'm scared, when I'm insecure. And that's important to me because it's allowing her to grow up with a truer sense of who I am as a father. And in turn, it inspires her and encourages her to be open with me. And I think as men of color, we don't approach fatherhood from that standpoint because we're very hyper masculine. It's just like, no, we can't show weakness. We can't show vulnerability. And I think that's a mistake because we're leaving a lot on the table. We're leaving a lot of love on the table. We're leaving a lot of affection on the table. And I think our kids are suffering from that. So when I think about the content that we're putting out, that's definitely one of the messages that I want people to get from the lives of men regarding fatherhood.
How much of an issue when it comes to Black fatherhood is breaking the cycle?
I think it's a big issue. And I think, again, it's going to sound esoteric, but I think what's missing is the lack of love generally in our communities, right? Love, in my opinion, I consider myself a romantic, but I think love cures all ills. I think love for self, first and foremost, is where it begins and ends. If you look in the mirror and you don't like what you see, then that's an uphill battle, right? So if men of color can start looking at themselves with love and accepting themselves with everything, with all the warts and all, I think that's the beginning of a very big movement. And then from there, the love will permeate. It'll permeate not just through our families and our immediate loved ones, but our community. And then we're going to start to take more ownership for our behaviors and our actions in our community. We're going to start to take ownership and assume leadership positions that we very direly need to assume in our communities to really start bringing about change. So I think love is the beginning and end of it all.
You've been very transparent with us on this conversation about Black fatherhood. What are Black men or men of color telling you about fatherhood? Because it sounds like they can be transparent with you. What messages are they giving you that you're listening with your head and your heart?
Well, I think people are searching for answers. I think men are searching for different ways to be fathers to their children that's different from the way they've been brought up. Because I think people are starting to wake up now. When I say people, I mean specifically men. They're waking up to the idea and the realization that the way parents raised us may not necessarily work for us anymore going forward with the newer generation. The newer generation is a lot more in tune. They're a lot more aware. They're a lot more connected. And so our parenting needs to change along with that. And so I think that's one of the major topics. Off the top of my head, one of the major points that I keep hearing is how do I adjust and adapt my parenting to the new generation, and how do I relate to my son and my daughter?
And what ways do you do it with your daughter?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it. It's just being open and honest with her. We have our weekly dates, and
Nice.
when we don't see each other, we're talking on the phone, and it's, hey, what's going on? And I think it's a nice relationship in that she understands that I'm her dad at the end of the day. And it's not, there's a line of respect there for sure. But at the end of the day, she can trust me, and she knows that she can trust me. And she knows that I'm going to be very, very honest with her. I'm going to tell her when she's made a mistake. But one thing I do tell her, and I make sure she understands it. She doesn't always understand it. Hopefully she will one day. But I'm just trying to give her as much information as possible so that she can be empowered to make good decisions. And I don't have a party when I tell her no. It doesn't make me happy to tell her no. But if I can give her as much information upfront, unfiltered, uncut, for her to make decisions when I'm not around, then I think I've done my job.
Excellent. Well, another area you mentioned that you want to enlighten men of color is in the area of personal development. What do you mean by that? What does that look like for the lives of men?
Yeah, and when I say personal development, it's a very weighted term, because within that you've got a spiritual development, you've got career development, you've got your knowledge of self. But I think what I really mean by that is getting to the point of having done, I'll call it the work, right? And it's going to sound all new age, but it's really doing the work of looking at yourself, looking at your flaws, looking at your positive attributes, and getting comfortable with who you are in your skin. And then allowing from that space, growing and becoming a positive role model to the people around you. And I think that that's a very personal journey. It's a journey that can be very dark, because we're not used to, specifically as men of color, we're not used to looking at ourselves in the mirror and being okay with our warts and accepting ourselves fully. Because we're told in the media and by the world that we're not enough. And so that's where I think personal development comes in. And what we're trying to do with our content and with our messaging and our events is really try to help alleviate some of that somewhat.
Do men come to you asking for help in those areas of personal development?
Yeah, absolutely. I think men come to us in different life stages, and I think that's how we've approached our content strategy, if you will, and how we want to approach how we engage with our audience is really looking at the different stages that men find themselves in. Whether you're a young man that's about to enter the workforce, graduating from college, what do you need? What are your fears? What types of things, resources do you feel you need in order to take on this new stage? Or if you're a young man or a man that's later on in your career and have been in your career for a while and maybe want to transition, what advice can we give you there? How can we help you make that transition? Or, hey, I'm going through a breakup. What do I do? And the type of advice that's out there right now is just go be promiscuous until you get over it, which is not the type of advice that I'd want to give my unborn son, for example. So it's just working through that in a healthy way. So I think it depends a lot around the stage in life that the men find themselves in. And then from there, we can definitely tailor solutions and conversations to help them.
Another area that you shared that you're wanting the lives of men to address, and it's one of the areas that has really impacted me through my online journey with conversations with men of color, is mental health. And it's almost like it's an elephant in the room when you're dealing with men of color. Would you like to share on that for our audience?
Sure. And I've just been, as we're speaking, I'm just getting more comfortable with this. But I'll make a confession because I don't know, I just feel comfortable here. But I battled through depression, and I'm still working through elements of that. And I realized that after the fact, I realized that there was something wrong. I don't want to say wrong, because there's nothing wrong with depression if you can address it, if you can own it and understand what it is. But definitely it's something that when you talk about depression and mental health, it's not something that we talk about because it's viewed as a sign of weakness. So for me personally, when going through the issues that I've been through and the moments that I've been through, that's been just understanding that, seeking help, talking to people, writing in my journal, for example, traveling alone and really getting deep into myself and understanding where this is coming from has been cathartic, because it's a topic that's very sensitive. And when I used to look in the mirror and say, no, I'm not depressed, right? It's not something that happens to me. I'm a strong guy. I've been a go-getter my entire life, and this is just, I'm just going through a bad moment. And I really needed to humble myself and say, Jason, you need help, and you need to, don't be afraid to ask for that. And that was the most empowering thing that I've ever done. And I think I've seen a complete change in my demeanor and my attitude and who I am ever since I decided to take that journey willingly.
Well, you know what? And first of all, I appreciate you being transparent, and I'm humbled that I've provided an environment that you can be transparent like that, and it's very important. And I think the more that we can help men by teaching through transparency, that, because I know what you said there, will impact someone somewhere down the line. It may have been someone right now, someone who watches on the replay, maybe today, tomorrow, 10 years from now. So I appreciate about that. How challenging of an issue do you feel mental health is with African American men?
It's significant because it's a significant challenge because, like I said, we're not conditioned to talk about these issues. And what's the first thing that you hear as a young 8-year-old when you fall off your bike and you scratch your knee? Men don't cry, right? Get up, man up, is what we're told. And so think about that over years and years and years of conditioning. And our parents don't do that maliciously, but it's just what they've been told, and so on and so forth. And so when you combine that with society and the pressures that as men of color we have to wear so many masks, for example, it's really difficult to take those masks off. After a while, you forget how many masks you're wearing, right? And so it's really difficult to really get down to who you are and admit something like this to yourself. But when you do, it's so empowering. And I think, again, that's where a community like us, like ours, and what we're trying to build is important, because we're trying to create a space where you're comfortable and you're confident enough and secure enough to raise your hand and say, hey, I need help, brother. Talk to me, walk with me. What can I do? What help can you offer me to kind of work through these issues? And it can be the smallest issue or it can be the largest issue. But I think, again, it starts somewhere. And I think it starts with you recognizing that and feeling comfortable and secure enough to go out and ask for that help.
And I'll just add on to that with African American men and men in general, that I'll just say that even strong men suffer.
Right.
Even strong men suffer. And one of the facts that I haven't talked about for many years is that people may not realize that 80% of the suicides that are committed by people over 40 years old are by men.
Wow. I didn't know that stat. That's incredible.
So I just pulled it out to say that, and that's a whole other discussion. I've had a number of conversations like that on my platform. So I'm very passionate about that. And I don't like to leave it unturned. I like to leave it turned when it comes to that area. Our time is running down quick, so I want to get you to talk a little bit about sexuality and men of color before we let you go, because it's just flown by so quick. But what do you want the lives of men to achieve when it comes to sexuality and men of color?
Absolutely. I think it's a broader theme of masculinity and what is a man, and it's trying to redefine that somewhat. And I think, again, that the topic of sexuality is congruent to that, because, again, it's man up. It's, this is gay. This is, you're a fag, and all these bad words. And that's unfortunate. And so what I want to men, whether you're gay, you're straight, you're whatever, is to understand that the issues that we're talking about are issues that you're going to feel regardless, right? It's the issues of not feeling worthy, not feeling accepted, not feeling like you have a place in the world. And so those are issues that I think affect all of us. But as it relates to sexuality, I think those are topics that, again, we don't talk about, like mental health. And so I want to address that. I have close friends of mine that are gay, and it's something that I love them tremendously, and they know that. And so it's just a matter of accepting that, showing people that that's okay, and that we can be embracing of all walks of life. And, it's just ignorance at the end of the day. So we're just trying to change that concept and that mentality of hypermasculinity and what sexuality means.
I wanted to make sure that you get a few moments to shout out all your team that helps you.
Okay.
So if you want, please shout them out, please.
Absolutely. I'll start with my boy Claudio Cabrera, who is hopefully watching. He works at the New York Times, but he's been an amazing, amazing friend and colleague. Alex Vega, who's in Orlando. I love you, girl. You've been awesome. Thank you again. Pat Ramos, who's built the website. He's been fantastic in just being so open and available to everything. Charlie Vargas, who's one of my best friends and such a close confidant. He is an integral part of this whole process, not just from a personal standpoint, but from a professional standpoint. My friends, my family, my daughter, JD, my sister, Barbara, who's here taking video behind the scenes, my partner, Andrea, she's been amazingly supportive. I couldn't do any of this without her. Just her simply hearing me ramble on and on and on sometimes is support in and of itself. And my mom, my other sister, Franchelle, my brother, John, my sister, Jerica. I mean, I have so many people to thank. But yeah, it's a village and it's a community behind the person that you're seeing in front of you. And I don't take that for granted.
What is your vision in the next year for the lives of men?
The vision for the lives of men in the next year is that we are going to be, we're going to be recognized nationally as a resource for men of color. And we're going to be traveling the country, espousing the message, talking to folks from, kids in community centers to corporate environments about what we're trying to achieve. And, it's going to be a success beyond my wildest dreams. We're working on a few things now that I think are going to be really successful. And so, once those things come out, I'll let you know, and I'll definitely bring you along or up to speed. But yeah, I think it's going to be super successful, and I'm excited about it.
What do you see, if at all, as the biggest challenge in reaching that vision? If there are any challenges reaching that vision.
Yeah, no, there are definitely challenges. I think the biggest challenge is finding that critical tipping point where people start to gravitate to who we are. I think right now we're still very young, and I think people are starting to understand who we are. And they're like, yeah, this is great. It's a great idea. It's a great message. But it's really to drive long-term constructive or structural change. I think we need to find that point in people's psyche that they can gravitate to and will always say, okay, the lives of men is it. Like when you think about Yahoo or when you think about major brands, Apple, for example, you know what you get with those brands, right? I want people to know what they get with the lives of men, and that's going to take some time.
Excellent. Any final words?
Just follow us, engage with us. We are working hard on putting forth content that is relevant, that is timely, that speaks to the needs of our audience. And we just hope that people are having conversations around these topics. And our social media handles, reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. On our website, we have our email address. Reach out to us if there's anything that you want us to cover, any topics that we're not covering yet, by all means, or any questions that might come up. Feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to engage.
Okay, well, that's fantastic. That's Jason Rosario of The Lives of Men. Certainly check them out. They are very high-end, very findable online. They've got a lot of action going on. And if you want to find out any information, there's the guy, and they got all their social media stuff. So I follow them, and they do fantastic videos. I am Dr. Vibe. I'm host and producer of the award-winning The Dr. Vibe Show. As always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. Please note, if you want to get in touch with me, the three best ways is Twitter at drvibeshow, website address www.thedrvibeshow.com, and email dr.vibe@thedrvibeshow.com. If you want to listen or check out any of my conversations, my epic conversations, you can go to YouTube. I'm on Stitcher. I'm on iTunes. I'm on iHeartRadio. I'm at Google Play. I just tell people I'm Googleicious. But I'm Googleicious. Just put the Dr. Vibe Show in your search engine. You'll get me. I'm also a certified empowerment coach. And if you would like a complimentary 30-minute session, please touch base with me. As always, Thank you so much for taking the time. I'd like to thank all the live watchers, and listeners. Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time. And catch
Thank
the
you.
Dr. Vibe show tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We're doing our monthly Dr. Vibe Allies, where we have black men from Canada, the United States, and England live discussing an important subject. So please catch us then. God bless. Peace to all. Keep the faith. And remember, sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger. Thanks again. Bye-bye.